Thanks, Perry. Great. Good afternoon, everybody. We are recording this and also doing a transcription. And I'm going to share my screen in 1 second. Let's see. Things are moving slowly. Hold on a minute. Great. Perry, are we good to go?
All good.
Great, thanks. So I am here today. I'm Ann Ball, and I'm here with Perry Williams, who you just heard her voice, and Kirk Money, but we're going to get started. And please take advantage of the chat. If you have clarifying questions, Perry will be monitoring that. And we also have 2 points during the presentation when we will be pausing for questions as well. So first thing is, we'd love to have you sign in through the chat with your name, email address, and organization or property name and town. And the whole meeting will last, it says 60 to 90, but I think it might be more like 60 to 75 minutes. And as I said, I'm Ann Ball, a program director at the Maine Downtown Center at Maine Development Foundation. And I'm here with Kirk Money, the Director and State Historic Preservation Officer of Maine Historic Preservation Commission. And MDF is the grantee of this wonderful program we have in Maine, and we work in partnership with Maine Historic Preservation Commission. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the program. It is supported through the National Park Service Paul Brune Historic Revitalization Grant Program, and that is administered by the National Park Service Department of Interior. This is a federal grant, a federal sub-award grant program. And Kirk and I are both happy to remind you that federal grants are technical and there is a lot of information. There's a large grant manual, and there are lots of things that you need to pay attention to. And we will do our best to make it user-friendly today. We plan to go through sort of the purpose of the funding, eligibility, timeline, program details, scoring of the application, what a community engagement project is, how to complete the budget, and then how it works with historic preservation tax credits if you already are working doing that on your property. And this is the location of the application, the grant manual, scoring criteria, and across the bottom of the page is this yellow banner where you can click on it and head right into the National Park Service area that we have developed for this grant program. Perry, I'm going to count on you to flag any questions that come up. Just interrupt me because on my screen, the way I'm set up today, I can't see the chat. The purpose of the funding. This is historic preservation grants for historic properties for preservation, restoration, or rehabilitation in the downtown areas of the communities currently served by the Maine Downtown Centers. And these investments are meant to drive economic development. We will be asking for data to show that these properties are driving economic development. And I noticed on the registration forms that come in that many of you are from communities that are not currently in the Maine Downtown Center. And that doesn't mean that you're not working on a project in one of our communities, but I do want you to see the list of the 24 eligible communities that can apply to this program. So if you are on this call today and you do not own a property or are not involved with a nonprofit or municipality in one of the, a historic property in one of these communities, unfortunately, you do not qualify. Portland has a downtown program in Woodford's Corner, but they are excluded due to their population being over 50,000. So other than that, these are the current members of the main downtown center that are either Main Street communities or affiliates. And these are the eligible communities. So I'm just going to pause to make sure everybody sees this. It also has to be within the downtown district. So if you are an Augusta property, you need to be within that core downtown Main Street historic district. We can help you determine if your property is in that district or not. But if you are outside of that core district, the project would not qualify. Okay. So who is eligible to apply? Nonprofit organizations, government entities, educational organizations, and private property owners. That is a very unique thing with this grant program, that private property owners are able to apply. Most grant sources, as you know, are often for nonprofits. The properties must meet all of the following conditions to be eligible. They must be listed in the National Register of Historic Places currently, or in the process of being listed, and we will discuss what that means in the process. It does not mean eligible. I'm sure many of you have heard that language. Oh, the property is eligible, I can apply. That is not the case with this program. You have to currently be listed or in the process of being listed. You cannot be a purely residential building. It has to be a non-residential building, except for a mixed use, which might include residential, or a building not used for religious purposes. And as I mentioned, it has to be located in the downtown district. And it has to be a project that will catalyze continued investment in the historic downtown. And I used the term earlier, drive economic development. And there are other things to look at in the grant manual. Project types, we refer to them as development projects or bricks and mortar projects. Those projects that preserve and protect the significance and integrity of the historic property. Grants are between $50,000 and $200,000, and they are paid for on a reimbursement basis. And I will say, in an earlier round, we had a grant application come in for around $48,000. They were not eligible. So it's very important to remember you have to apply for between $50,000 and $200,000. Carrie, any questions in the chat so far?
None yet.
Okay. So the timeline. So that first block there, July 1st to September 1st, the Maine Historic Preservation Commission will review plans and specifications and return them to the applicants with comments. Their goal is to do that within 7 to 10 days. And they have to be 90% complete and generated by a licensed architect or engineer. So that's a requirement of the grant program, that you have those plans and specs, and getting pre-approval from Maine Historic Preservation Commission is a important step that I encourage you to take. It's not required, it is highly encouraged. And here we are today, July 23rd, having our pre-application webinar, our information session. And then we have open office hours coming up August 1st. So after today, you can take a look at the materials and you may realize you have questions, and you can come to those open office hours. And then the last day to submit those plans and specifications for pre-review is on September 1st. And then we have another set of office hours, September 9th. And then the applications are due electronically through our link at 5 o'clock on October 14th. We do a review of what you have submitted and let you know whether it is incomplete. Sometimes there's something important missing, and we are giving you an opportunity to get that to us. We'll let you know what you're missing, and then we will say, you have 1 week to get us that material. And we will notify awardees in November 16th or 17th. And then right away, we're going to have a mandatory grantee webinar from 12:30 to 1:30. So if you are applying for this program, please put November 18th on your calendar. And then we will be asking for grant agreements to be signed and returned to MDF. And then we load your plans and specifications and your scope of work all into the National Park Service portal to get Section 106 and NEPA completed. And that process takes up to 120 days. The reason we rush so much on the front end is because we want to get approval from them so we can then say to you, you are good to start on the grant. You can't start until that part of the process is complete. And we want you to be able to begin construction in the spring of 2027, like when, the snow melts. So we have put that March 1st is the approximate date that we will be able to do our press release announcing new grantees. And then we also have quarterly financial and narrative reports that are due during 27, 28, and 1 in 29. And all projects construction needs to be completed by March 1st, 2029, and invoices. So if you owe somebody money for their final part of your project, you've got to get us those invoices. And then final financial and narrative reports are April 10th, 2029. So that's the overall timeline of the whole project. I don't think I have anything else on that one. And I'm going to turn it over to Kirk, right? I think that's where we are.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everybody, for your interest in the program. I want to start with just a couple of things. One, to reiterate what Anne said about the fact that this is a federal grant program, and with it comes a lot of requirements and procedures that you need to follow. And that's not to discourage you at all to apply for this program. It's just important for you to understand that at the outset. And all of this is, and what I will go through is detailed in the grant manual. And that's the other thing I encourage you to carefully read the grant manual all the way through, and maybe even twice, and ask questions of Anne and Perry as you work through that, because a lot of this material will be more fully explained in the grant manual. So I'm just going to highlight some specific activities that must be completed before you get underway. The scope of work must be approved by the Maine Historic Preservation Commission. The grant agreement with Maine Development Foundation must be signed. The NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, and Section 106 documentation has to be approved by the NPS. And as Anne said, that can take up to 120 days. The baseline documentation for the preservation agreement must be prepared. A request for proposals will be generated by the grantee based on the approved scope of work and reviewed by the commission. And the procurement documentation form must be completed and submitted to MDF before contracts are signed. No project expenses may be incurred prior to the notification from MDF to the applicant that the last step above has been completed. It's very important to keep all of these requirements and these timeframes in mind. So next slide is we're going to.
I was going to say, we're going to dive into the program details, but I think you're continuing this section, Kirk.
Yep.
All right.
So eligibility for this program means that properties need to be listed in the National Register of Historic Places or classified as a contributing resource within a National Register listed district at the national, state, or local level of significance. If you have a question as to whether your property is listed in the register, please contact us and we can confirm that for you. That is, contact the Maine Historic Preservation Commission. If your property is not listed, there is a narrow way alternative in which you may be eligible to apply for this program under the following conditions: that you provide correspondence from the Maine Historic Preservation Commission confirming that the property is eligible for listing in the register, that you have confirmation from the MHPC that it has reviewed a first draft of a National Register nomination form and that it is substantially complete, that you provide a letter from the property owner affirming support for the nomination and if it's part of an eligible historic district, you have to have letters from all property owners in the district. And you must have affirmation that the nomination will be completed to the satisfaction of the commission in a timely manner so that it can be presented to the State Review Board at one of the commission's quarterly meetings and be listed in the National Register prior to the completion of the grant-funded project. So again, if you have questions about this, please contact the commission and we can walk you through this process, or you can contact us to see if you've submitted something, a draft, or you have confirmation that it's been determined eligible. Please confirm that with us. The National Park Service will conduct 2 related but separate reviews of your project before you can start work. We've touched on this before. These are the NEPA review and the Section 106 reviews. This is to ensure from their perspective that the project is executed in conformance with the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties and that it does not have any adverse effects on historic properties or the environment. This is a process that will include the commission in that the Park Service will consult with us on this. But as Ann said before, this can take up to 3 months or 3 to 4 months for them to do this process. So keep all of these deadlines in mind. That the timeline that Ann went over with you previously is, I would put that right out in front of yourself. Because you need to adhere to that throughout this program. And the next slide, and you will be required. Oh, Ann?
We have a quick question in the chat. It just Amy from Rockland asked if we anticipate that this grant application will also be available next year.
We don't know, Amy, because it depends on whether we decide to apply again. This is the 4th time that MDF and the Maine Downtown Center has received this funding from the National Park Service, and the 4th time that we've gotten the largest award in the country. So we have a really good track record. And right now we have a current group of grantees underway, and we are starting this new round. So I'm not sure we'll apply next year. I could see it being the year after that. So no guarantee, but Kirk, do you quickly, as a sidebar, want to say something? I know we hadn't planned on it, about the community building program. And Perry can probably capture the registration link, or we can send it out afterwards to this group for that information session.
Right, sure, Ann. For those of you who don't know or may not recall, in November of 2024, voters passed or approved a bond, a $10 million bond for preservation and restoration of buildings that are considered historic community buildings. We've administered a first round of grants from that program A second round is coming up. We will be releasing application materials and the grant manual for that program in the next couple of weeks, I hope. So check our website for that. That program is different in some respects to the Paul Brune program, in that it's only available to nonprofit organizations or governmental entities, and no governmental funding can be used in the matching share. But those grants in this round will range between $25,000 and $500,000. So if you don't think you can qualify for this program, but you might qualify for the other one, I would encourage you to look into it.
And we'll make sure to include the link to that grant program and to their informational webinar that Kirk just referenced in a follow-up to this group, because it is a great program. Any other questions in the chat, Perry?
I don't think so at the moment.
Okay, great.
And I'd just like to add to what you said about another round of Paul Brune funding.
Yeah.
Of course, it all depends on whether the Congress and the administration approves a budget that includes funding for Paul Brune. That's always
100%. That is where it all starts.
That's where it starts.
You are absolutely
I actually do
right.
have one more quick question that just came up in the chat. Can multiple people apply from the same community, or should it just be one per community?
We have had multiple applications from the same community. Absolutely, it's fine. It just has to be, you know, the property owner. Like, I know we have lots of Main Street directors on here today, and this isn't, unless you own property, you would not apply, but you can encourage property owners, nonprofits to apply. But yes, it's okay. You'll be competing against each other is the only thing I'd say. But yes, we did have communities last round with from the same community. Are we caught up, Perry?
Oh, good.
Okay, Kirk, back to you and a project sign.
Okay. So in the meantime, you've all read this slide, so I'm not going to go over it except to say, and if you read the fine print on that example there, the content of the sign is noted in the grant manual. So there is some specific language you have to have on this sign, and of size and where it's located. So that is in the grant manual.
Yes, there is. There's actually a template that they gave us this year. So this round of grantees will have a lovely template to fill out.
And that the cost of making that sign is an allowable cost in your grant application.
Right.
Any project that is awarded a grant, the owner will be required to sign and execute a preservation agreement with the Maine Historic Preservation Commission. It is the owner that will have to enter into these preservation agreement. And this requires, for a period of 10 years after the project is done, it requires the property owner to obtain written permission for any subsequent changes that that owner wishes to make to the property. And that's an agreement that will be registered in the Registry of Deeds, and that you'll be responsible for doing that. This just is a little diagram that shows you, if you have a project idea, once you are subject to a preservation agreement, you would consult with the commission about what you had in mind. You would provide us with information, perhaps plans, photographs, etc. We would review that. We would either approve it, or we would have comments and questions back to you to redesign perhaps. And then you would continue on with your project, and then you would update the agreement documentation that is part of the preservation agreement. And the agreement documentation basically is a photographic and brief narrative document that shows what the conditions of the building are and its character defining features. More of that, more information about that is in the grant manual. Next. At various points in this process, including in the application, you will have to submit photographs. Documentation photographs for the preservation agreement, project photos before, when you submit your application, during, when you submit interim reports, and then after, when the work is completed. These do not have to be taken by a professional photographer, but there are requirements stipulated in the grant manual for what the photographs should be as far as size and quality. We recommend that you consult with a preservation consultant and include that person to do some of this work, especially this documentation process. And that cost can be included in the budget.
Everybody's favorite topic, Kirk.
Yes, procurement. This, again, I'll just remind everybody, this is a federal program. There are very specific procurement requirements that you will be expected to follow. For this program, we're looking at competitive bidding, and you will, again, the intent here is that there is a fair and equitable opportunity for contractors or consultants, if that be the case, to bid, basically an open and fair process to obtain bids. You can't just identify one person and because you've worked with that person all along and say, that's my person. You will have to put this out to bid. And more detail, again, on the procurement process is available in the grant manual. So there you have this little bubble up here that says you have a contractor under contract. Be aware that that current contract may or may not meet the specifications of the current grant proposal or the Secretary's standards, and scopes of work may need to be revised. Be prepared to seek 3 bids if you cannot demonstrate that the contractor, architect, consultant was competitively selected. So there is an opportunity if this is part of a multi-phase project and you're underway and say you're applying for funding to do phase 2, if you can demonstrate that the original selection process for the contractor and consultants was done competitively, you may be able to continue on with that contractor, but you will have to provide that documentation. In some circumstances, competitive bids can be waived. And then the last slide that I have is maximum hourly rates. So you may not, these are based on Federal Civil Service GS 15 Step 10 salaries. And the current salary tables can be found on the Office of Personnel and Management website. So that is updated annually. You'll be looking at the 2026 rates for Maine. And this would be for rates for consultant or architect services. Would also be rates that you would use if you have donated
Accounting, consultant, yeah.
Whatever, yeah, consultants that you may be using.
Great.
Okay.
So now we want to see if you have any questions. Amazing photograph. There should be a prize if someone knows what building it is. It's in Augusta. That's your hint. Colonial Theater. Anyway, questions. Perry, what's happening in the chat? Or if for some reason you would prefer to take yourself off mute, Perry could call on you.
Nothing in the chat.
Okay. All right. Well, keep monitoring it and we will keep going.
And I have a question.
Sure.
Okay,
Mike.
hi. So far, you know, we often break our projects down into hard costs versus soft costs, and I've heard so far that signage and the preservation consultant are both allowable expenses. If our
Yes.
hard costs are $42,000 and those consultant fees are another $8 and we hit 50, is the $50,000 threshold a hard cost threshold or a total project threshold?
It is the total project. I was just trying to think of your, Kirk, feel free to, I'm processing without seeing Mike's face. I'm having a hard time here. So the total grant request needs to be $50,000 or more, Mike. So yes, those costs you named, preservation agreement, preservation consultant, those can be part of that 50,000.
How about design fees and legal fees?
Yes, both of those are allowable expenses as well, but keep in mind what you submit with the grant application should have plans and specifications that are 90 to 95% complete, and your grant could cover that remaining bit.
And I would
Okay.
add, Anne, that it cannot cover the costs of developing those plans and specs. So
Yeah,
you
that
have
was my
to,
next question. So
Yeah.
you're on your own
Yeah.
to get to the 90% set.
Exactly.
Right.
Thank you, Kirk. Yes,
And-
it's more to get you over the finish line to get to that 100% complete construction documents, or I guess that's the way to phrase it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And Anne, what is the matching share requirement for this program?
20%.
20%.
And it can be cash or in kind. And when we go over the budget, we'll show you how you can calculate it, but go ahead, Kirk.
No, I was just going to say that if your project, your total project cost, including your matching share, is $50,000, you're not going to get to the threshold for the minimum grant. Your project has to be whatever 25% of your project cost would be, plus the $50,000. So it's more like, you know, I'm just winging it here, $65,000 or something like that, whatever that is.
Right, the 50,000 plus the match, right?
Right.
Yes, good point. Does that make sense, Mike? As far as how the match works?
Yep, it does.
Okay, we will talk about it when we get to that section. Anything else, Perry, in the chat, or someone wanting to come off mute?
Nothing in chat.
Okay. All right. All right, let's talk a little bit about these 4 topics before we wrap up. And Kirk, I think this one's me. Scoring. We have a grant review committee. They are made up of representatives from the real estate industry, representatives from Maine Historic Preservation Commission, representatives from the Maine Downtown Center Advisory Council, and representative from Maine Preservation. And the reviewers assign points based on the answers to the questions and the grant applications. You have to remember that the reviewers don't know anything about your project. So do not make assumptions about what they know. They learn from what you provide. So we encourage you to be thorough. And we encourage you to attend the optional team's office hours on August 5th or September 9th if you have additional questions. The Community Engagement Project. This is a public education project that's linked to your grant funded project that focuses on revitalization, historic preservation, or the impact the project is going to have on the community. It could be about why the project preservation drives economic development. It could be reaching school children. The example on the left were these amazing art projects that were done by students in Rumford for that project. And then in Skowhegan, the spinning mill developed a preservation IPA with the local brewery with a QR code that sent people to the story of the mill and why the mill was going to drive economic development and, really preserve this part of Skowhegan. We've had people do story maps, storytelling, all sorts of inspirational ideas. Creativity is encouraged. You can use between 5 and 20% of the required match towards this project, the community engagement project. Could be a segment on community television too, all sorts of things for the CEP. But the only thing I want to caution is it is not a fundraising tool. We've had a couple organizations say, we're going to do a film and it's going to show preservation, and then we're asking for money. That is not okay with the National Park Service. You can show the story and, film, what's happening and what the results are, but you can't ask for money. That has to be done sort of separately outside of the grant. That doesn't mean you can't use the film footage you create for that at a later time, but just to be clear. But the project itself, the community engagement project, is an allowable expense in the budget. And we've had really great things that have happened. The budget, the big thing is being really planful and getting good estimates. If you are applying to do a roof, get 3 estimates and include them with your grant application. Or if it is a window rehabilitation project, see if you can get 3 estimates. And you might not be able to, but that's the goal, is to get 3 estimates for how you came up with that budget number in your proposal. This is the match part that Kirk had asked about. So a non-federal match of 20% of the total grant request is required for each grant. So in the case of Mike's question, if he applied for exactly $50,000, he would be required to have $10,000 match beyond that 50,000. That's 20%, and the total project cost would be 60,000. So federal grants can't be matched by other federal grants. So if you have another grant and you are looking to use that as match, that is not allowable unless it's community development block grant money. And we do have a great CDBG program here in Maine, and you might have money from them and you can use that as match. That's federal HUD money, actually. But that's the only exception.
And Anne, I just want to interject here that
please,
if you were to receive a Paul Brune grant, and if you received a historic community building grant, the Paul Brune grant funding could not be used to match the historic community building grant. So just to keep that in mind.
A quick question in the chat: can TIF funds be used as match?
Can TIF funds be used for match? They could for this program. They can't for Kirk's program, which I know isn't the subject of this grant because they are government funds. But does that sound right to you, Kirk, that TIF funds could be used?
I would think so, Anne.
Yeah, I think it can be. Great question. I'm going to take you into the budget for a second. This is the form, the fillable form in the grant program. And it auto fills things down here at the bottom, which is basically, you know, how much are you including? You're asking for $50,000. And let's see, the total project cost is 78. And their match is 28. They're not required to have a $28,000 match, but they have an overmatch. And that's something that the National Park Service loves to see, that their money is actually leveraging additional money. But anyway, these are how it works. You really put in a very detailed information of what the service or the item is, who is it that's doing it. Maybe it's, you know, you could put 3 roofing estimates or something. And is it an hourly number of hours and the cost per hour, or is it a total fee, as on the second line, $25,000? And are you counting it as match, whether it's cash from your bank account or it's matched from another source like TIF funding that someone just asked about, or it's from the grant request that you're asking for it. So it's a pretty easy form to fill out, and that is in the grant application. And I'm going to give you a few other steps to take with the budget narrative that are really important to think about. I'm not sure if that page number is right. I just realized, Perry, I might not have edited that. Anyway, in the grant manual, there's a whole section on, you know, doing a good budget. Have the projects, the plans and specifications been reviewed by Kirk's office? And do you have the background documentation, like the drawings, available for review that you're sharing with a potential contractor when getting estimates? And are the contractors familiar with the property? How many estimates did you receive? And have you included the cost of donated services, whether it's time in the project budget? We have a lot of volunteer treasurers in nonprofits that are also accountants, and they're running the books for the grant. Their time is an allowable match or a logical match for you to include. Your match doesn't have to all be cash.
Couple quick questions in the chat. The first is, can it be matched with non-federal grant money?
It has to be matched by non-federal grant money. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear on that. Federal money cannot match this grant program except for community development block grant money, which is a federal source.
Second question, are funds that are spent to prepare for the grant, such as professional fees, allowed to be counted towards the 20% match if you were successful in receiving the grant?
Can you say that again, Perry? Sorry.
Are the funds spent to prepare for the grant, such as professional fees, allowed to be counted towards the match if you're successful in receiving the grant?
No activities that take place to submit this proposal, or anything that happens until you receive the final sign off and from the federal government that says the project can proceed and we have a grant agreement and an approved scope of work, all those things that Kirk referenced, nothing up to that point can be used for match or for reimbursement from this grant program at that point. It is only when we say work can begin that you can start building match and all of those things. I mean, it sounds logical, but unfortunately it's not the way it works. It's at the point of starting the grant that things will accumulate. I hope that's clear.
And I have another question. It's Mike.
Yeah.
So to that point on plans and specifications, would plans from, say, vendors suffice versus a design professional, an architect, if your project is a big roof, for instance?
Meaning it's a contractor.
The contractor
as
who
opposed
will,
to an architect.
correct.
I'm going to let Kirk answer it. I have I think I have it right, but Kirk, would you mind taking that one?
I will, and I think, Mike, it's going to depend in part on the nature of the roof. If you have a complex roof if it's slate, and there's a lot of detail involved in flashings and making sure that you're creating a waterproof membrane. I think you're going to need advanced. We're going to need to see architects' plans and drawings on that.
Okay.
I suspect that if it's a very simple gable roof, maybe a contractor comes up with plans and specifications about what to do. That may be fine, but you should keep in mind that that contractor cannot then bid on the project.
Right. How about, and this may be more applicable, how about you need to repoint two sides of your building? Would elevations that had been, with notes on those suffice?
Well, again, you're going to need to have specifications on the masonry. You're going to have to potentially have a mortar sample. So if you got a preservation consultant to do that analysis and to identify those areas that need to be repointed, and then there is a very specific specification written as to how the work will be done, that may suffice for limited repointing. But if you're into reconstructing a wall, then that is beyond that level of detail. And again, if you had a skilled mason doing that and coming up with that recommendation, that mason could not bid on the project. So keep that in mind.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'll just add one more layer. We have had, Mike and Kirk, some applications that had drawings from contractors that just didn't have enough information. And then we've had others that have sufficed. So, I mean, I do think Kirk's right. A little bit is dependent on what the project is, are the details there, that kind of thing.
The other thing I would add, Mike, is that, and to everyone, is that if a roofing project, what seems like a straightforward roofing project, is just one component of a much larger project, you're going to need to have plans and specs for the whole project. Can't just separate out this one piece.
Although, Kirk, sorry to, have this conversation with you, but if the plans and specs for the full project, they don't all have to be at 90% or 95% for the application, do they? Only the roof section would be in this case, or am I wrong on that?
Well, what I was saying, Ann, is that if the roof project is just one component of the larger project that the Paul Gruen grant is supporting, that's what I meant.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Okay.
But if the Paul Gruen grant is just for the roof, then yes.
Betsy has her hand up.
Betsy.
So my question is there an opportunity for a shared application? I'm specifically thinking of there's what looks like one building where it's all unified storefronts and they were all designed and built at the same time, but there's actually 3 separate owners.
Oh.
And they have really unique glazed terracotta facade.
Wow.
And it would be wonderful to have, say, all 3 of them redone simultaneously. And it, like I said, it presents as one building, but it's really 3 separate buildings with 3 owners.
Wow. Okay, Kirk, we've never had that question. Go, Betsy.
No, I don't.
Because I love that idea of thinking of, all 3 property owners getting together for the one facade. But I am trying to figure that out, Kirk, whether it's 3 applications that come for the whole thing, or it's some kind of combined thing. I might have to ask our program officer, unless Kirk has an idea.
No, that was my suggestion, Nan.
Okay,
See if the Park Service has
okay.
come up with that.
Of course, I
Betsy,
come up
that's
with the
gonna,
weird one.
that
Yeah,
was great,
nice.
but it's a really interesting project, and I like the idea, obviously, of having the building all getting worked on, not just one piece of it. So I will put that on the list for our program officer, Betsy, and I will get back to you how we can navigate that.
Thank you.
Anything else, Perry, that you're seeing before I do our last couple slides?
All good in the chat.
And
Yeah.
before you go off, are you going to be talking about the budget anymore?
No. What do you
Okay,
got?
there was one thing I wanted to mention to people that, again, this is in the grant manual, but I think it's important for you to hear today. Contingency fees are not an allowable cost.
Yep.
So you should be prepared in your narrative to explain how you will cover unanticipated costs beyond what the grant will fund or what your matching share that you have put in the budget will cover.
Great. Thank
That
you.
in mind.
Yep. All right. Tax credits. So that one of the exciting things is that this program does work with historic tax credits, state and federal. But Kirk, I don't know if I can't remember whose slide this was, yours or mine.
I don't, Ann, but go for it.
Okay. So the big thing is if you're using federal preservation tax credits for your project, you can't apply for a project that is getting the same work done that the tax credits saying, and I'm saying this so badly. Let's say you're applying for a roof, but you're not taking the historic tax credits on the roof. That is okay. However, if you are like doing a giant repointing of masonry and you're actually applying for those state and federal historic tax credits and you apply for this grant program, you can't do it. It has to be a separate project. And we have lots of projects. I would say maybe 30 to 40% of all our grantees of this program are private developers that are using historic tax credits, but they are not taking the historic tax credits on the same component they are applying for grant money. They separate it out. Kirk, you want to add anything to that?
I would just say, Ann, that it has to be a very discrete project that you can clearly separate both from the accounting side of things and the contracting side of things. If you have one general contractor who's doing everything, maybe if they have a sub for just the roofing component, and you can administratively track those costs,
right,
so that you're not, you can show what's covered by Paul Brune, and then when you do your tax credit project, those are a totally separate bucket. As long as you can track that, you can use the two programs.
Right. And Mike Line, since you've asked us so many questions, perhaps you can remind us. Johnson Hall was a successful application to the applicant to this program back in 2019, and they used their REvitalizeME downtown program money, grant program money, to do the window restoration at Johnson Hall, but they did not take tax credits on that project, and they were able to do all the accounting separately. And Mike, I don't know if you want to add anything from that story.
No, I think you summarized it correctly. You just can't double dip, you can't use this and then take the tax credits. So it's and we just called it we phased that project. So that was phase one, which was repointing in windows, and that was not part of your QRE calculation for tax credits in phase two.
Great, thank you. Okay. So that is the end of our formal presentation. These are a few reminders. And I would ask that any questions about this grant program start with me. Because if it is something that is more of a technical or regulatory nature, I will put you in touch with Kirk or someone else on his team to answer the question. But start with me. I think that's easier from a management standpoint for the Preservation Commission. So, other questions? And I'm going to stop sharing the slides so I can see all the people again. All right. It's a great grant program. It is highly technical, but the projects are wonderful. And I feel like we've been having some good impact getting this money out in Maine communities. So I hope we will get applications. And I'm happy to hang out beyond our time to answer any other questions. But we're pretty much done, right, Kirk? Okay. Perry, are we done?
I
We're
think
gonna
so. I
send-
just wanted to flag that that slide does say that the application and the grant manual are on the website. They will be. As soon as we
Yeah.
get the word from NPS, and we will let you all know. I will send out an email to everybody who registered with the webpage again, the grant manual.
Yes, in the interim, we will send a follow-up email to all of you that will have the information about the community building grant program that is happening through Kirk's office. We will send a recording and transcript of this meeting today. And then we will send a application that was successful from our last round, because our application is waiting for approval. Thanks, Nancy. And from National Park Service. And it was supposed to be within a certain amount of time, and they have held it up just a bit, not because it's not good, but because they have something else going on. So we're waiting for approval. It's going to just be a little bit late, and we will hopefully, we'll be getting those details to you, but we'll send you a sample grant application so you can say, oh, this is what's involved. We really want you to have that right up front. And as Perry said, we'll get that to you early next week. And then one more email at some point that says, here's the final grant manual and here's the final application. Okay. Great. And Betsy, I'll get back to you with your very special question. I love it. All right. Well, that is it, people. Thank you so much. And I will hang out for a few minutes if anybody has other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Sure.